This one time at a wedding. Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. So yes, we made it to American Wedding. This was originally supposed to be the final film in the franchise. They ended up doing direct-to-video like sequels like afterwards, but it didn't really have any of like the main cast except for Eugene Levy. And then we didn't get American Reunion for several years like afterwards. So this was supposed to be kind of the final film. I'm definitely glad that it wasn't, because this is definitely, I would say, my least favorite out of the franchise. And, as you can guess, it primarily focuses on Jim and Michelle getting married in this film. Jim really wants to give Michelle, like, the wedding that she wants, and he's also really trying to impress her parents because they kind of have doubts about him. You also have a couple, like, subplots, one involving Michelle's sisters introduced in this film, and both Stifler and Finch are trying to win over her heart. That definitely has some funny aspects to it. And then you also have a part where Stifler's kind of trying to redeem himself because he's always just being a dick to everybody. So that's, for the most part, that's pretty much what American Wedding is about. Now, like usual, the movie opens up with, a funny scene to start off involving Jim once again. This time around, you have Jim and Michelle. They're at this restaurant, and Jim's getting ready to propose to her. Of course, she doesn't know that, and he mentions something about like her going to check like her napkin or use her napkin, and she thinks that he's being dirty and wants her to go down on him. So she goes underneath the table and starts giving him head, and of course Jim was not expecting that at all. And then he ends up getting a call from his dad, who says that he actually forgot the ring. So his dad comes to the restaurant, tells him, he's like, "Oh, here's the ring." And he's like, "Man, you look really sick. Let's take you outside." And of course, doesn't realize what's going on underneath, pulls him out from his chair, exposing Jim to everybody in the restaurant. And then Michelle ends up coming out. He ends up proposing, and that's how you kind of kick off the film. So, they pretty much maintain that same opening sequence, like I said, like in the first like American Pie film. They always have something that pretty much focuses on Jim and him embarrassing himself to opening up like each one of these American Pie films, which is always funny. So I'm not going to, similar to the other reviews, I'm not going to go through like the whole entire movie. Probably just going to go through kind of some of like the highlights of like the film, just because otherwise I could talk about this for a while. But yeah, initially, Stifler is actually not invited to the wedding because Jim and Michelle, they're kind of worried that he's going to mess things up because he's always kind of causing chaos wherever he goes. So he's not invited to the wedding, but he ends up finding out about it because he's driving a bus, goes by Jim's house, and sees there's like a bunch of people. So he thinks it's a party, crashes it, comes inside, and finds out, like at first he thinks it's like a graduation party, but then he realizes, it's a wedding afterwards. But he finds his cake, he's like messing around with it, and then Jim ends up seeing him coming in and telling him like he has to leave and everything. But Stifler ends up accidentally getting the cake on both Jim and himself. And then one of the parents' dogs, so they have two dogs that they brought with them, one of them sees the cake and, jumps on top of Stifler and starts licking his pants. And Stifler is enjoying it, which is, weird. But Jim's trying to get the dog off him, and then somehow Jim's pants end up coming down. And then the other little dog ends up coming behind Jim and starts humping him. And then after that, you end up having Jim's parents. They're like, "Oh, let's go introduce you to Jim," or whatever. They open up the door where these two guys are, and sure enough, that's the first really introduction that Michelle's parents get of Jim. Is him, basically like molesting a dog. So yeah, not a very good impression to start off with. So basically, the rest of the film, he's trying to prove that he's actually worthy of their daughter's affection. So one of the big things is, so at first, like I said, they don't invite Stifler because they're worried that he's going to mess everything up for the wedding. But he ends up convincing Jim to do so because he tells him that he can teach him how to dance. So that kind of becomes like a thing throughout the movie. And at one point, they end up going to Chicago because they're trying to find this person who they think is a girl to help make Michelle's dress that she like really wants. So they end up going to like Chicago. I'm pretty sure, yeah, Chicago. And they start like looking around. Stifler ends up stumbling into this gay bar, and he doesn't realize it at first. But he starts talking to like a couple people, and he ends up having this big dance-off with this guy. And it's hilarious, was not expecting, like, especially the first time seeing this film, was not expecting that from Stifler. So they start dancing to all these like different songs, like "Sweet Dreams" and things like that. And that's definitely like one of the funniest parts of the movie for me. And he really impresses, like Jim, and he also impresses the guy who's actually the one who ends up making the dress for Michelle. So they end up getting that done. But it's hilarious. Like I crack up every time I see it. You also at one point end up having Stifler's in charge of. He gets to basically do the bachelor party for Jim. Well, he gets the guys, so it's Finch and Kevin, because Oz isn't in this movie, and I'll go into that more in a second. But he gets the guys, go back to Jim's house, planning like a bachelor party for him, gets a couple strippers, because the gay guy at the club actually hooks them up because he was so impressed with Stifler. So he gets a couple girls to come over, and they're going to have this bachelor party. But what they don't realize is once they have all this stuff ready to go, and Jim ends up pulling up, and he's with Michelle's parents because he's going to have like a dinner and a talk with them. So, as you can guess, things kind of go disastrously for everybody involved. Again, another one of really funny parts in the film. Jim just can't seem to get himself out of like trouble, and they kind of sidestep their way out of it, but it's definitely still not the best look for Jim like overall. And then once again in this film, you do have Stifler. He kind of gets gets himself in kind of a shitty situation, and he ends up being entrusted with Michelle's grandmother's ring to hold for the film until the wedding. Well, at one point he accidentally drops it, and the dogs end up eating it, and so he has to follow the dogs around for a little bit because he has to wait for them to go to the bathroom, and they finally do, and he gets it, but then Michelle's parents end up coming over, Jim's parents, and they're all talking, and they ask what's in his hand. He's like, oh, it's a truffle. And so Michelle's mom, she's like, oh, give me it, I want to try a piece. And he's like, no, you can't. And she goes to grab it, and so he takes it, and it's dog shit, and he ends up eating it, and it's just yeah, he has the most, I would say, disgusting bits of all the American Pie movies. So another part that's gross, but it's definitely funny. The one thing with Stifler in this movie is that he seemed a little off to me. Don't get me wrong, he was still super funny for most of the film, but there was parts that he was almost on the line of kind of being a little annoying at times. It was almost like he was trying too hard. I don't know, it was just kind of weird. And because I love him in 1 and 2, and like I said, for most of this he's still really funny, but there was just some parts where he seemed a little off. So that, kind of bothered me. Now, there is a funny part with him and Finch, and they're trying to win over Michelle's sister. Well, Stifler tries to be more like Finch and kind of smart, because that's what he thinks that Michelle's sister wants. I can't think of her name, but what she wants. And then Finch he reverses the role and tries to be more like Stifler. So it's a role reversal. And they kind of play that throughout most of the film until later on, and she ends up really realizing the roles are actually completely opposite. So you get some really funny moments with that. But yeah, in this film too, you're missing quite a bit of the the main cast from the first 2 movies. I mean, granted, some of them aren't main characters, but Oz, he's not in this film, and I'm assuming at the time, I didn't look, but I would assume he probably just didn't want to do it at the time, or maybe he had other roles, other films coming out. And then you also don't have Vicky, you don't have Jessica, Shermanator, the MILF guys. So that's one of the big things with this movie too, that it doesn't completely feel like an American Pie movie to me, and that's why it's a little bit lower, just because you don't have everybody involved in this film like you did all the 3 other films. So that was definitely a letdown. Especially considering, like I said at the beginning, that this was supposed to be the movie that kind of wrapped everything up, or it was going to be the final film in the franchise, and that was going to be really disappointing, especially if they didn't have those guys involved. So I'm glad with American Reunion they kind of end up bringing everybody back. But still overall, this film does have its moments. There is quite a few, quite a few funny scenes throughout the film. There's also one where Jim gives himself a haircut, down there, and then it ends up going into the cake that they have downstairs below, and that's again disgusting, but what you kind of expect from the American Pie franchise. And so it does have it's definitely highlight scenes that people remember from the different films, but it's just missing those different aspects, and some of the characters aren't as as good or like as funny as they are in some of the other films, like specifically like Stifler. So overall, I would give this one probably like a 7 out of 10. I still, like I said, there's really not a film in this franchise that I don't like. I enjoy it, but it's definitely out of the 4 main films, it's probably the one that I least go back to like the most. So it's a 7 out of 10 for me. So, but let me know, what your guys' thoughts are of American Wedding down below in the comments. Again, what is your favorite film in the franchise, or what is your favorite comedy movie involving like a wedding? Let me know down below in the comments. And as always, guys, please make sure if you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. It really helps the channel out, and that way you can see my videos. And make sure to hit that thumbs up, as that really helps the video. YouTube's algorithms and stuff are just crazy, and where I'm a smaller channel, anything you guys can do really helps out, so I appreciate it. But like I said, make sure to hit that thumbs up, and as always, guys, make sure to check back for more Pop Culture with Pat.